that guy. His name is Jeff Witt. Jeff Witt is in the building. It has been a long time. Good to have you, brother. Listen, we're continuing a conversation that we began on yesterday, how to build your self-esteem after infidelity. If you have been the one who has been betrayed in your relationship and it has been a significant blow to how you see yourself, to how you show up in the world, we're going to be talking about the impact and what to do about that impact. Because guess what? What you're experiencing today does not have to be your permanent situation. It could begin to be the first day of the rest of your life if you make certain shifts and changes in your life. Before we get started, Last Chance Weekend starts tomorrow. We want your prayers. We want your positive energy coming our way because we have work to do. And we anticipate having amazing stories of transformation on the other side of this weekend. But let's dive into today's conversation. Good morning, Jeff. How are you this morning?
I'm doing good. I'm glad to be back.
Where you been?
Bouncing here, bouncing there.
Okay. You've been bouncing. Maybe you need to sit down somewhere. Sit down somewhere and get back into the swing of things on this show. So let's talk about the impact of infidelity on one's self-esteem. Listen, interestingly enough, when you first met your spouse, when you were in that dating season, when you were in that committed courtship transitioning into your marriage, there was a high level of self-worth and self-esteem because you felt loved. You felt like someone was into you. You couldn't, you remember those days, Jeff, when you were on the phone with your woman falling asleep because you couldn't let them go? Like you just wanted to talk to them all the time, spend time with them all the time. You were complimenting them, how beautiful they are, how much you love their body, just everything. It was just a smorgasbord of verbal affirmation that built that person up. Do you remember that season?
Oh, absolutely. I remember like it was yesterday. And it unfortunately is fleeting. And that's, because of familiarity, we get comfortable in our situations. When we get married, we have all these other responsibilities. And it's no longer just about us. And so there becomes a lot of distractions where that feeling begins to fade. And with that fading, and a lot of times we get distracted, and that can lead to bad decisions.
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt. So then challenges happen in your relationship. And then for whatever reason, someone makes the decision to step out. Now, interestingly enough, the betrayed spouse isn't always aware that something was wrong. There's two scenarios here. There's the constant complaining. We've been talking about this for a minute. Nothing's getting better. And so for whatever reason, I make the decision to step out. Or a person feels kind of sideswiped. They feel like, what? Where did this come from? I had no idea. You never communicated with me that anything was wrong. I thought we were all good. And then I find this out. And then it's a complete shock and surprise to that spouse, right? So whether it's scenario A or scenario B, they both have a significant blow to one's self-esteem, because what happens is there's the automatic comparison that's being made. So if you chose someone else, inherently the belief is there must have been something that I was doing that was wrong, right? So Jeff, it's interesting. You talk about a book that you've read and how people's thinking, you always accuse me of it, false narratives. What's that term? What's that book?
Logical fallacies.
Yeah. Say it again.
Logical fallacies.
Logical fallacies. Explain what a logical fallacy is in a general sense, and then compare it to or tie it into what I'm saying. Because what happens is the assumption that the fallacy in our logic is that, well, if you did this, it must have been because of me. And all of a sudden, one's self-esteem is impacted because they feel like I must not be good enough. I must not be pretty enough. I must not be servant enough. I must not be giving you the sex that you want. And so there's a direct attack on oneself. Talk about that.
Yeah. So logical fallacies and cognitive bias are innate in human beings. It's where we have a mode of thinking where it's justified in our minds. But if you were to actually break it down, it doesn't make sense. For instance, one popular one is confirmation bias. Okay. Confirmation bias is when I'm looking at what you do. Like, for instance, if I'm not a big help around the house, I have to admit that. So if I clean the kitchen, right, my wife won't know that I cleaned the kitchen because she'll only see the one thing I didn't do. So if I bring it up and say, "Hey, honey, I cleaned the kitchen," she'll see the one plate I didn't get or the something the kids just put on the counter and be like, "The kitchen's not clean." She's looking for that because she has the expectation in her mind that I don't do anything, even though it may have been a complete and utter wreck that she would have been upset about. She'll only notice that one thing that I didn't do that makes her feel incomplete. And that's a cognitive bias called confirmation bias, where we're looking for the one thing that's wrong. There's others out there, bandwagon is one where people jump into whatever their group of friends or their other people are doing because they're doing it, and they jump on the bandwagon. And we think that that's what's supposed to be done because it seems logical because everyone else is doing it, right? And so this is where logical, when it comes into a relationship, logical fallacies come into play, where you may think something is your fault or something is true that maybe is not true. For instance, a person can feel neglected and they can mention it to you, and you could be shoving that under the rug, and they make silent comments because they want to be subtle about it. Hey babe, I wish we could spend more time together. Or, hey honey, I remember when we used to do this and we don't do this anymore. Oh, but I'm too busy. Right. And so we'll come up with all these excuses and different things to shove it under the rug so that we don't have to deal with the actual direct conversation. And what that leads to is maybe that person feels neglected. The other thing that I see a lot of is where a lot of times people think that their spouse is just a cheater. They're
Mm.
like full born, oh, he's always been like this and I just didn't know it. And they're out there looking and hunting every girl that walks by and whistling and doing this stuff, and you just didn't know it. And the truth of the matter is, what I find is about 90% of the cases or more, that's not even true. There's somewhere where the relationship became distant,
Mm.
where conversations were had but were either neglected. And I'm not saying this gives them an excuse, but what I'm saying is it does add fuel to the fire to look for that attention somewhere else. And it opens up a doorway where maybe that person at work is a little more kind with their words. Maybe that person at work is showing a little more of attention, and it creates a situation where feelings begin to develop in a different realm because those feelings are no longer present in the home, which
Mm.
is a problem in a lot of relationships, being able to keep that loving feeling. Um, so there's a lot of work to be done, but like none of us got married with a handbook. We use our parents and our environment and what we see to guide us. Well, 60% of those relationships end in divorce. So we're not getting the best advice. And that's why we have to spend time with counselors and spend time studying and reading and learning how to cultivate that loving feeling. I know for me specifically, our relationship was pretty much hell for the first 10 years. And something snapped, and I went through my emotional affair, and then I got out of it and realized I wanted to keep my relationship, and it forced me to want to change how we did things because I wanted that loving feeling back. And it took me years to actually learn it.
So
But
let me ask you a question. So let's make this more personal, okay? Because we're talking about the impact of self-esteem when someone has been unfaithful. You have, from what I could see, a very confident wife, a very attractive wife, a very supportive and loving wife. I mean, I don't, So when she found out about your emotional affair, did it impact her view of herself? Did it impact her self-esteem?
absolutely. So we went through all different kinds of phases because that's what happens when we get surprised. Our mind starts to wonder. We went through the phase where she wasn't good enough, and then it was, well, she gained a little weight because of the baby, and so now I'm looking somewhere else. There's a whole bunch of things going on in her mind. And then it was, oh, I'm just like that. And there was a whole bunch, and none of those narratives were true. None of those narratives are true because we never sat down and had the real conversation of what was really going on. And
So
the truth,
let's pause right there. So there's a story. We were talking about this last night, Jeff, in our meetings, that oftentimes there is a narrative or a story that we are telling ourselves. And the story we're telling ourselves has a lot to do with these illogical or the fallacies that you're talking about. We conjure up these beliefs, these ideas that reinforce more low self-esteem, more low self-worth, and we've become married to these ideas. They've become cemented in our subconscious. And so even when the explanation does come, even when the facts come out, if it doesn't align with the narrative that we've been telling ourselves, we reject it. And we rather hold on to the story because the story feels real to us. And so in essence, it's got to be me. Obviously, I'm not good enough. Obviously, I don't do this. And so the reality is, in that initial phase, there's what we call the fault or the blame shifting phase, where we're constantly shifting blame and fault, and we involve ourselves in that process. Now, I do not believe in the idea that we shouldn't examine ourselves. We should, but we shouldn't falsely put on us what is not owed or due us when these type of things occur. And Jeff, it takes a significant amount of time to build up one's self-esteem if they're not going through a correct process where clarity is given. It makes me think of a couple recently that came and did a private marriage intensive. When I say her level of trigger was on a level I haven't seen before, and the emotion. Now, this was an attractive woman, right? And when I tell you, you would have thought that this woman thought that she was the most horrible, horrific thing on the planet Earth because of this affair. And it was in that full disclosure process where we really got a chance to unpack the why. Once she truly understood why he did it, her self-esteem came back just like that, because in her mind, she was comparing herself to the affair partner who happened to be 20 years younger. So as an older, attractive woman who's in shape, how can I compete with someone who's younger than me and attractive and in shape? So that comparison alone was attached to her low self-esteem. But when we got to the why of the affair, we discovered that it had nothing to do with her age. It had nothing to do with her attractiveness. It had nothing to do with her body. There were other factors that caused this affair to happen. And as a result of that level of understanding, her esteem was restored. And so this is why this process that we take you through is so critically important. Listen, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and we're going to go deeper into this conversation because I want to hear about more what Jeff has to say about the impact of self-esteem when an affair has occurred. Listen, stay right there. We'll be right back.
Hey family, Hassani and Danielle here, and I want to tell you about the Phoenix Awards Gala happening on October 7th, 2023. Couples Academy is hosting its first annual Phoenix Awards Gala, a celebration of perseverance, patience, and persistence, focused on couples who have endured and overcome significant hardships in their marriages.
Nominees of this prestigious award will have come to the brink of destruction in their marriage without giving up, and are living a testimony to what is possible when two stand as one.
This is no ordinary gala. We are honoring 5 of the most resilient couples across the U.S. and abroad. And here's the most exciting part. You get to pick our nominees. And there's more. Wear your most exquisite gowns and black tie ensembles and prepare for a 50-foot red carpet, cocktail reception, dinner, live music, and dancing. We're going to raise the roof and the standard for marriages on October 7th, and we want you to be there.
For tickets, go to couplesacademy.org/events. Hey guys, we're back. You're watching the Couples Academy show. We're talking about how to build your self-esteem. That's right, after infidelity. But what we've been talking about is how it's impacted your self-esteem. But before we go into the building process, Jeff, here's the reality. We're talking about the impact, right, that it's had on the betrayed spouse and how their self-esteem is affected. But I would guarantee you, if you were to poll an overwhelming number of individuals who engage in the affair, at the end of the day, it was low self-esteem that caused them to do it in the first place.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
talk about it, because I have a lot to say on this.
Okay, so that's literally what led to me wanting to step out. I'm glad I didn't make it to that point. She caught it right before something happened for real. But the problem was when I would come home, I was working like a madman. I was working day job, then working a night job, like a professional day job, coming home working in the jewelry store in the afternoons, and then working on the weekends, bartending, doing whatever I could to make money, because I was so focused on trying to take care of my family and be a man and get ourselves out of debt. She saw me that as me trying to avoid the family. And so there's this narrative in my head going like, I got to take care of the family. I'm not doing as good as I know I can. She's seeing it as me trying to avoid the family. So when I would come home and try to give affection or try to give love, she's rejecting me because she sees me as being out in the street all the time. I'm then taking that as she doesn't want me anymore. And then after years of that, I began to look for what was missing in our home, because it was to the point where I was pretty much on the couch every night sleeping, where there was no like words of I love you. I would say it and get rejected, never hear it back, and I would get the sure you do. And my wife used to say como lo burro y la carreta, which means like a donkey loves the cart it's pulling. So she had a self-esteem issue that I was looking at her like she was some work for me. I had a self-esteem issue that she didn't want me. And then we both are now not having any real conversations, any deep conversations, because the pain was so deep between us. We're both experiencing stories and narratives in our head that had nothing to do with reality. And it created a divide that was so wide that in my loneliness, I sought someone else. In her loneliness, she's just spent more time with family.
See how it happens? And we're always thinking, I think we think the worst of our spouse, right? So who would ever think you cheated because you're insecure? You cheated because you had self-esteem issues? No, you had this lust demon on you, and it's oftentimes that's not the case. And so here's the reality. A lot of people, when you really have conversations, they feel like they're not good enough, or maybe they don't feel desired anymore. Because usually at the beginning of that relationship, there was a lot of desirability. Even in the book, Mating in Captivity by Esther Perel, she says typically prior to marriage, the desirability is high for both men and women. But after I do, it plummets for women because of a number of different circumstances, right? So the things that they were in pursuit of and the things that they desired, marriage and family, took their desire away. Interestingly enough. And so when a woman's desire diminishes, and we're just talking about one aspect of how it affects your self-esteem, oftentimes a man may not feel desired in his marriage anymore. So compliments may not come. The initiation of sex may not come. The rejection of connection may be there because she's tired. She's got a lot to do. She's dealing with the kids. She's dealing with work. She has all these stresses. And so now he doesn't feel the way he once felt about her because he's not getting what he once got from her, and begins to question, do I still have it? Am I still desirable? Am I still loved? How come I'm rejected with sex? Maybe I'm not worthy. Interestingly enough, check this out. A lot of men who have physical challenges, right? Physical, ED, erectile dysfunction, and they're not able to perform the way they once did. It's a blow to their self-esteem. Right? And when they have a spouse that's complaining about it and talking about it, or maybe they're accommodating, but yet and still there's something within me that I feel like I'm not a man. Sometimes one's low self-worth, low self-esteem, questioning one's own sexuality, he will then reach out and connect with others to see, do I still have it? Can I still perform? Am I still desired? Am I still attractive? I don't get anything from you. I'm getting things from other people. That's the drive. So it's not about how beautiful someone is. It's not about someone's body. It's not about any of these things. There's something in me that I'm struggling with. And rather than having honest conversations with you or working it out with you in my own insecurity, I step around you and connect with someone else to get in me what's broken fixed, even though it doesn't solve the problem. I mean, we can go on and on and on. Yeah.
We keep talking about the man leaving for a more attractive, younger female. I don't see a lot of that. A lot of times I see guys going for women that honestly don't even compare to their spouses.
That's a fact as well, Jeff. And Jeff, I would say that's the majority of cases.
The majority of it. And
the majority of cases.
Lies going on in our own heads. And really, when I see that, a lot of time it's literally just the lack of connection. Let's talk about what you were talking about for a second, because I think this is very important, because it doesn't just happen in relationships. It happens in everything we do. We buy a car, we're all excited, we're bragging to our friends, want to take a ride in a nice car, whatever it is. It could be a Honda, it could be Mercedes, doesn't make a difference. Our brand new. And we're all excited about it because we do this specifically with objects, right? But we end up doing it with people too, and it's unfair. And 6 months later, it's still a nice car. 2 years later, it's, man, I don't know. I think I might want to get something new. But what ends up happening is we stop appreciating what we have. Let's look at why that happens with people, though. It's because we, like you said, women a lot of times will get married and then their desire to do things goes low. I've noticed that what happens typically is when they get everything that they want, the lack of having a new goal for that relationship causes them to settle in. There's no more chase. There's no more hunt. And in that chase and that hunt that I was able to recreate my relationship, we were able to re-spark things because we created things together that we wanted to chase and hunt together. Another thing that I noticed is that men tend to have a hidden jealousy. They'll never speak it out loud. But when you get men alone, you ask them this question, there's a jealousy that happens when the children come into the home. Because now the wife is so focused on the child, and it's like, what am I like? I feel like wet dirt. Like I'm not even getting any attention. You're focused on this child so much. I'm being completely ignored. It's like you got what you wanted. You got your kids. You got your house. I bought the car. We did all these things together. And now I'm just like not even important anymore. And so those two factors come in many, many, many relationships. And it never goes talked about because men never want to admit that they're jealous of their own children.
Well, Jeff, I admitted it. I mean, I was vocal about it. I'm jealous of my own children because the love that you gave me, the affection that you gave me, the time that you gave me, the money you invested in me, now all goes to the child. It's just like, well, what happened? So not that I treated my kids bad. I didn't. I love my kids, but I was just like,
me too. Can I get like
where's my hugs and kisses? Like, what's up with this? And to your point, Jeff, it impacts people. Now, if we don't know how to deal with these situations, we either aggressively reach out or passive aggressively do things that self-sabotage our lives, our relationships, and things get worse. You said something a little bit earlier about, you have a car and, oh my God, I love this car. And then a couple months later, you're like, it's just a car. And it kind of reminded me of a scripture, Proverbs 27 verses 20. It says, hell and destruction are never full, so the eyes of man are never satisfied. Now, not man, but mankind, right? And I think to your point, that is true. New becomes normal. The novelty is no longer there.
Here's the secret to getting around that. I learned this from car guys who I'm using the car as an example because they're like, well, after a certain point, it's just old and that's what it is. But these guys who actually love their car, they spend time on new projects for their car. They want to get new lights and they want to decorate it a different way. And they want to go do things in that car. And they want to go to the track and they want to go show it off at a car show. They spend a lot of time working on what they could do to the next level in that car. But if they're just using it to get to work every day, it becomes just a car. I'm telling you, if you want your relationship to be like that that special kind of relationship, you got to constantly be looking at what can I add, what can I build, what's new, how can I trick this relationship out better, how can I make this more than what I thought it was. I got everything I wanted when I got into this relationship. Now, how do I make it better than that? Setting that next goal, that next level of expectation is how you can restore that old shoe feeling into something new and spectacular.
Absolutely. So I just want to reinforce the point that you have two people in a relationship, to your point, Jeff, who are not necessarily having conversations with each other, but they're having internal conversations with themselves. And these internal conversations that they're having with themselves are reinforcing more doubt, more fear, more worry, and it diminishes one's self-worth and self-esteem. And because they don't have someone speaking against this negative thinking, because they're not articulating it outwardly, they're articulating it inwardly. What, even the scripture says in Ephesians 3:20 that he's able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that you can ask or think, according to the power that worketh in you, right? The power that's working in you. So if fear is working in you, doubt is working in you, low self-esteem is working in you, right? No matter what anyone outwardly says, what's working in you will overpower that. So even when your spouse says, what, babe? What? Are you crazy? I feel this way. I think that way. It doesn't matter because you've cemented this belief, this deeply embedded belief in your subconscious as to what you believe the reality is. And you hold on to that, even though it doesn't serve you. And so this is why we have to change the narrative. Because if the narrative is not helping you become the best version of yourself, to have the best relationship that you can have, you got to change it. That inner critic. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah. There's another angle here too. Well, another one that I notice a lot in these relationships is what'll happen is there'll be some kind of disruption that doesn't get mended, whether it's an argument and it doesn't get completely mended. And what ends up happening is we step outside of our homes and talk to our friends who are having similar or worse problems than us. And then we assume that those stories are true about us. I'll give you an example. My wife had a friend who had a friend who basically her husband was walking all over her, doing all this stuff and crazy. My wife would come home from spending time with her friend, and all of a sudden I was doing all these things. It was getting because it created a fear in her mind that I would be doing the same things that other man was doing, right? And so a lot of times we're listening to our friends who are just as broken as we are, and we're taking their stories and their narratives and translating them into our own relationships, creating much worse situations than exist. And I see this all the time. It's really, really bad. That's probably one of the worst things that I see that destroys relationships is allowing other people's relationships to see and affect how you view your own.
Man, you done hit something there. And I wish we could unpack that a little bit more, but guess what? It's 10 o'clock. I got a session that starts in 15 seconds. Love you guys. See you in the morning. It's Friday tomorrow. Ask the expert. So come early with your questions so that we can get into it. Love you guys. See you soon.